please welcome LACMA's CEO and Director, Michael Govan, in conversation with world-renowned contemporary artist Mark Bradford.
That's you, buddy. There's your water.
World-renowned.
World-renowned. He is world-renowned.
Yeah, right. Holy pants.
It's great to be here with you, Mark. We've known each other for a long time, and I thought today we could talk a little bit about art, and a little bit about art affecting people, maybe a little bit about philanthropy. He is world-renowned. By the way, can you figure out which one is the artist and which one is the museum director? That's your first task. Mark is world-renowned, and most recently representing the U.S. At the Venice Biennale, which was an amazing exhibition. And then I just saw your exhibition recently at the Hirshhorn Museum, but you've been shown around the world. We're going to talk a little about your art, but also about what you've been doing in Los Angeles. And here we can refer to the city as this city.
Yeah.
You grew up in this city.
I did.
In a little area called Leimert Park in South Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So the first obvious question is, how do you go from working at your mom's beauty parlor on Leimert Park in South Los Angeles to being a world-renowned artist? Whatever that means.
Right. Well, you know what? People like to make history in these like linear lines, but mine was a lot of stops and starts, and it had a lot of different parts to it. I did grow up in a kind of matriarchal. My mother was a hairdresser. It was a business. It was a small business in South Central, and the thing that I didn't have access to was too much art. I got in a yellow school bus. I went across the town to LACMA, and I looked at everything on the wall. They said, that's art. I went back to the community, and I didn't understand that what was happening in the community, these small little creative things, was art.
Right.
But I didn't process that. So I was kind of a curious kid, but I didn't have a name for what I did. A lot of times, communities don't have a name for creativity. They just are experiencing. My community, we used a lot of the hair, the nails, the language, the clothes, and it was just so for me, I was always creative. That was the word that I got. I was a creative kid.
Which you are. All right, and then I want to tell you, so that neighborhood, Leimert Park, figures forever in your life. We're going to end up there at the end, but so a lot of the work you made, you actually took the materials of the neighborhood. So Mark is a painter. You make paintings that are very sculptural because you use materials, you rip things, you rearrange them, you use paper, you kind of destroy the surface as you're remaking it. And a lot of the materials you used in your early work were literally signs, material from the neighborhood, right?
Yeah. Well, so how do you, so you want to be an artist, right? And like, how do you pull things that make sense to you from a local space? But you've gone to art school and you want to have it on a larger platform, but you still want to have things that have memory to you. But you don't want to inscribe and be, I hate when people make you the spokesman for things. The spokesman for all black people, the spokesman for anything. I don't like that big spokesman.
I won't do that.
But please don't. So for me, it was just a matter of pulling information that was always there around you and developing a language around it. And abstraction worked for me because, my God, I got in school. I always thought I was just Mark. I got in school, and people started to ask me, what does it feel like to be gay? What does it feel like to be black? I was like, whoa. Like, I had to whoa. What does it feel like to be 6'8"? What does it feel? I mean, there were so many of these things, these really, really narrow things. I escaped into abstraction to make a space so that I could play.
Right.
I can figure things out. I'll let you know what my blackness is. I'll let you know what my gayness is. But I need a space for that.
Well, actually, abstraction...
So I kind of created a space for that.
And abstraction at that time, it's emerged. It is a kind of space of white, powerful artists at that time representing American freedom. There's a whole story about how abstract expressionism after World War II that comes to represent American freedom and expression. And so you're sort of invading this space, but flipping it around by not sloshing paint around, but rather thinking of it in a different way.
They told me, no, don't go there. It's We've already deconstructed that. That's the bad white guy narratives, and we're going to put that away. And I just thought, no, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. You know, let me unpack that information. Let me figure out what it means for me. You know, it's almost like I just got to the buffet, and you're like taking away the shrimp. It's like, whoa, you know, wait, I'll figure it out what it means to me. You know what? That's what I think the 21st century can be. It's not about the should, it's about the could. So I just figure out what things work for me, and I was excited that this was this hegemonic, old, big, white New York school, no women, no people of color, and I just thought, oh man, that's a space I want to go. Yeah. That's a space I want to disrupt. That's that word they use now all the time, disrupt. I was like, well, I'm going to disrupt, you know.
Which you did.
Abstraction, why not?
Well, and also, by the way, just on that point, 20 years ago, had you been emerging into the art world, it would have been a little harder to disrupt. I mean, there were a lot of artists who were pioneers. We were talking the other day about Kerry James Marshall, who also grew up in South Central, who is now one of the most world-renowned artists, but that came pretty late. He used to go to LACMA just to learn to paint and draw and look at art, and his dream was to have one painting acquired by the museum. But that was monumental in those days. Obviously, some way has been paved, but it's still a sort of not a clear world, not a clear path for everyone in this art world.
Shit, no. I mean, it's never, I mean, oh, God, I mean, I always say a good, healthy dose of low self-esteem and no plan B will really make you work hard, you know? Just a little dose. You can't have like a big dose of low self-esteem, but you gotta have like a little dose.
Right.
And then you gotta like no plan B. And that, when I became an artist, there was no plan B. There was no plan B. And I got it. I went to school late. I was black. I got all the, you know, this is not gonna work. So I thought, well, you know, everybody's telling me it's not gonna work, so I might as well give it a shot, because I'm already, it's not gonna work, so it's all uphill from there. You know, it's like, you know.
All right, that I can see that, although I have to say that even your early work has a lot of confidence about upending expectations and being playful. Maybe you have that freedom to do that, but everybody thinks, like, look, Mark, figure you play basketball, so you're, you know, you didn't really.
No, but you know what, but basketball season, I am like God in the community. Like they say,
close to the basket.
Who do you think's going to take it? Last night they asked me about the Golden Lions. No, the Golden State.
Golden State Warriors.
And they said, Mark, you think the Golden State Warriors are going to take it? I said, absolutely.
Yeah. So
6'8". You know, I'm closer to God. And but you know, as a kid.
But then you used I mean, like we have a work in our galleries that you see in some of these slides, and you start playing with basketballs and making it part of your art.
You know what
I
loved, my God, I did this antebellum dress where it was half of a Lakers outfit and this big antebellum hoop dress.
We had that video.
And I carried it. I carried a basketball out into the basketball court and played. I cleared that basketball court faster than anything you'd ever seen. But I loved it because I was actually trying to work out you know, when you're born in a body that's 6'8", and you're simply just a simple kind of shy kid and not really sports-minded, that's called a sissy. I love heterosexual men's projection onto my body. Oh man, if I would have had that body, if I were you, if I would have had that, I mean, I just love to sit there and watch them. Like, you wouldn't have done anything. You would have been working at the same, you know. But I love this projection. I've always lived with that projection of my height. So it was me like playing with it, owning it and playing with it. Like, I started playing with stereotypes instead of like well, I've never really been annoyed by them, but they do get a little bit annoying sometimes.
And so, but you have that. One of the things that's I love about your work is it has a playful and self-confidence, and you're always ready to destroy something, to change your style, to take on a new topic. How do you keep that going? That's just inside you.
You know what? I do this for me. I was a hairdresser for you. Whatever you wanted, you want to look like Beyonce, I'd go across the street, get some hair, and hook you up. But I do this for me. This is what I do for me. I follow genuinely the things that I'm interested in, the politics that I'm interested in, the things that I want to investigate. I negotiated enough in my world, especially when I was younger, because I was one of those kids that kind of fell through the cracks. And when I fell through the cracks at 18 years old, if there's not a space in academe, because I didn't, get my little stuff together and go to the right schools, I went to nightclubs. So I did get a PhD in nightclub life. And I am definitely proud of that. I own that one. Oh, look, somebody's clapping out there. That's right. But what,
there are other
unfortunately,
doctors in the house.
I roamed the world, and I worked in nightclubs, and I was nightclub life. And there was a part of me that knew that there was more, but I had not created that academic structure to move through it. So, and it was the 80s, and everybody, man, that was not a good time to be 18 or 2. The 80s was not a great time to be 20, 21 years old and want to experience life and be free love and free everything with AIDS. It was a hard time. Right. So I did kind of fall out of it.
As was Los Angeles in the early 90s. And I think the art community, obviously growing up here, there must have been a big impact of, it's Rodney King. It's all the things that are part of the tumultuous, difficult, rebellious, complex quality of Los Angeles, and you've put Los Angeles in maps in your painting. So you say you're an abstract artist, which you are, and you've taken over that space, but the last paintings you were making, underneath there are maps of Los Angeles and post-Watts rebellion, all the buildings that were bombed out. And so can you say something a little about that interest in this place and how you really started to glue some of your work and ideas to Los Angeles, to South Los Angeles?
Well, I think that Los Angeles is really interesting because it's almost bifurcated by the freeway system and therefore the grid system. And even race is sometimes defined by redlining and all these kind of economics and housing. But at the same time, it's a very fluid city. There's people coming constantly in and constantly leaving. Right. It's a city of Hollywood. It's a city of the earth and desert and the mountains. So I always like that confluence of things at one time. And I like horizontal.
Right. That's LA.
I like horizontal more than vertical, but I think because I'm so tall that it just, like New York feels a little more squishy, and then Europe feels mega squishy. I'm like, whoa. Like when I was doing the Venice Biennale, everything was so little and I had to keep ducking. Everything is like ducking, because you guys don't understand, like the height thing. So I just, I'm not, it's just kind of worked for me. It always has and it has a history of no history. It's a very short history. I like places that have very short history.
We're making our history now.
Yeah, we're tearing it down and burning it down too. And I like the fact that we've had two uprisings here when the people aren't happy. I don't mind living in a, well, look at the world that we're living in now. It's a lot of unrest. It's a lot of things being unearthed and moved around. I'm comfortable in that.
So let's talk about your most recent work that I've been interested in, that before we talk about philanthropy, in that you've been you've started using text. Yes. And you had a big commission. You actually made a work for the U.S. Embassy in London. Yeah. And you chose as that the text of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. We ended up talking about that and wanting to show that work at LACMA, and then you all of a sudden in the middle of that said, no, I want to make a new work. Yeah. We had a picture of it here, and that new work is a pretty intense work. I have thought about it as history painting, but you put up the text of Diamond Reynolds when she was live streaming police shooting her boyfriend in the car and making that text. And you talked about that text. And I was interested in the fact that recently you've become more visible, straightforward about your discussion of unrest and problematic of the times we're in. Is that a fair assessment that you've put it out there now?
Well,
like in that work that's at LACMA that you can see right now.
This would be a good time to do that if you're going to do it. I think right now a straight shot to if you want to stand up and push back, this would be about the time. Yeah. This would be a good moment if you're an artist and you want to push a little bit. Direct is good right about now.
So you should, if you haven't seen it, come to LACMA, because this huge work, which is 20 feet tall and 24 feet wide and was an amazing thing to see made, speaks so directly and poetically. People just stand in front of it for a really long time, sit and think and decipher this text. But let's move then to action, because as you became successful as an artist, we're thinking about the hood, the neighborhood you came from, you felt it wasn't enough to be an artist, or you directly took action in your own neighborhood. So what Mark has done is created his own nonprofit. And maybe I could step back a second. When I was interested in LACMA, the big giant institution on Wilshire Boulevard, moving outside its comfortable locale, we started working with an elementary school in MacArthur Park, 3.5 miles away, which I can tell you is a very different neighborhood than the one that the museum is in. And we decided we would make a museum in an elementary school, which is now an arts magnet school, and reading scores are up, and the kids are part of that, and they have it's the only elementary school in the US with a professional art gallery. Story was it used to be Otis Art Institute, and so there was an art gallery, and we took it over. So the first people I called when I was like, how am I going to transform this? I called you and Ruben Ochoa, another artist in Los Angeles, and you kind of helped me imagine what a museum in an art gallery on MacArthur Park in an elementary school was. You made, so I remember you made tube men. There's a swap meet near there, and you had a swap meet where the kids were exchanging drawings. We've never really talked about it after the fact, how you approached that, and how your ideas for that show came about, and maybe led to
you walk around.
You walk around the neighborhood.
Yeah, you walk around. You kind of walk around and you listen, and you kind of look at what they need, and when I started to think about wanting to do something a little bit more, because I thought about it, it's real simple. Just go back to before you got fancy and you went to the art school or you went to university. Just think of when you were in that community with no access, right, feeling just a little bit different, and not having anything in your local community that you could hold on to, rather it be food, mental health, arts. Just think about that. So it was very easy. I just went back to Little Mark. I went back to creating a space that would be welcoming to him with all of his contemporary ideas, and a safe space that he's protected. It's not, and I started from there. I started from there.
So we share this passion, have been discussing this idea of how do you break down the expected structures of institutions and sort of rethink the structure of where art is and how those resources are shared and who has access. So that kind of thinking led you to establish what's called now Art+Practice. So rather than just being an artist, he became a museum maker.
No.
You established a gallery in your own Leimert Park. You bought buildings to preserve them, including the salon or the beauty parlor. With Alan, your partner, Alan DeCastro, and Eileen Norton, you set up a 501c3. You set up a foster youth program, and you brought contemporary art to Leimert Park. That's a big endeavor. Did you know where you were going with that?
No, it wasn't. It's not a big endeavor. See, we do all this barking. Blah, 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 blah. It's not that simple. I believe in contemporary art. I love these ideas. I love contemporary ideas. They don't belong to any race of people or any class of people. I love contemporary. Contemporary ideas just move the conversation forward. Everybody should have access to them. And okay, I will admit that I'm a little bit uncomfortable about moving into neighborhoods who have more immediate needs without at least looking at them. Leimert Park, we're in Spa 6. It is epidemic of foster youth. I noticed visually with my eyes when my studio was there's just too many young people that would hang out in the park. I just walked across the street and kept asking, why are you guys on we're transitioning out of the foster care system. Well, there was enough young people that I talked to, I could see that there really was a consolidation of epidemic here. So I thought, okay, I know exactly who I am in the art world. I'm Mark Bradford, right? And I know the contemporary art world. I know that part. But if I partner and if I slice this building in half and bring something there's access and then there's need, just put them like neighbors. Sometimes neighbors are awkward when they first are neighbors, but eventually they kind of work it out. People kept asking me, well, how are you going to put a foster youth organization right next to a contemporary arts organization? I said, well, you just put them next door. You just, and so what the thing is though, how can you tell people they're valuable if we're not there? How can we tell people, yes, we want to engage in a conversation, but, well, you got to get on 2 buses to go all the way up to LACMA to have this conversation. Right. How am I going to sit down and talk with a young a young lady who's transitioning out of the foster care system. You have value, and the only thing and the only places she's ever seen are social workers, drab foster care government buildings. It wasn't possible. I spent more money making the foster care side more beautiful than the contemporary art side. I built that out first. I spent the most money, because if you're telling people that they're valued when there's so many people telling that they don't have value, you got to balance that out somehow. So it was simple. It was really just simple. It wasn't a big, I knew what I wanted to do. I would go to the hair salon after going to, because when I was at Cal Arts, I worked full-time. I went to school full-time, and I worked full-time because I had to. I needed the money. And I would have all these contemporary ideas. And I'd go to the hair salon and tell my mother, oh, you're postmodern, and oh, girl, let me tell you about this. And it was interesting. It wasn't like they didn't get it. We just had conversations about what I learned at school. Then sometimes I would take the stuff from the hair salon, and I would take it to Cal Arts. So I began to understand is we need to build bridges. We need to stop worrying about once we build the bridge, what's going to happen to it. Right. Just build the damn bridge and let people go back and forth, and they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So my whole thing was, you got to do the listening, though. Mm-hmm. You got to do the listening. I know what you're building out, and I know that neighborhood that you're taking part of LACMA and you're moving it. I think that by physically moving it, it is doing more than opening your mouth. That's just the way that it is. It's not, it's not saying it's doing. So for me, I think that we're at an interesting time when we have the possibility to do.
Right. Which actually, at this time, we have more possibilities than we've ever had in our world. I mean, just being honest, there's a lot of discussion about the fact that the art world is becoming so diverse and so inclusive that it's confusing.
I think
and
that's great.
Like, are you kidding? Let's look at it the other way. It was a little boring, and now it's getting a little exciting. And I think about myself of advancing the idea, and we're planning to put LACMA through partnerships of sharing artwork with other institutions, East Los Angeles College, but looking at where we can put these artworks in other communities. I don't think that would have been possible 20 years ago either, just a mental leap. So it is like, I feel like we are living in, I know the title of this seminar, I think it's about shared prosperity with maybe the emphasis on shared. I feel like we're in this world that we can do things we could never have done, including your project, including what we're talking about, and that the number of solutions and ideas now swirling around us in these more diverse communities is just explosive.
But we're going to have to be okay. I don't know why sometimes I'll give a talk or I'll say something, and something might not go right, the slides not go right, I'll say something, oops. We can't be, life shows up and sometimes it's messy. We have to get okay when we're figuring things out, and it gets a little messy. If you're coming to the table with the right intentions,
right,
we have to allow it to get a little messy and still believe that it can still move forward. So I think that a lot of these conversations we're having, we're going back and looking at gender inequalities. We're looking at all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Oops, my bad. Okay, it's going to get a little messy. For things to move forward, we can't be perfect all the time.
Right.
It's just not the way. I never started off to make art and practice or started off being an artist or anything. It wasn't a strategy. Good God, if it was a strategy, I would have done it a whole lot different than this. I mean, I would have been much more, strategic.
Yeah.
I just followed kind of what made sense to me.
Right.
And along the line, I think you have to get people in the room that have the real shared, what is the word? When, the passion.
Yeah. Shared interest, shared
the
passion.
Shared interest.
Shared humanity.
You got to get the shared humanity. And then you can kind of get some done. I don't get some done. That sounds funny. And so I just always stick to that.
And while we're talking about spreading out, I think it's worth saying that a lot of people think that is also a kind of disintegration, but I see it as the same. So the idea that we want to create centers for identity, places to share our experience. We're building a giant museum on Wilshire Boulevard that your work is part of, and many other artists. and we have, 1.5 million people coming. And I think that it's not a negation of that idea of pride and civic center. It's about sharing it and creating it again. I mean, I see people in Leimert Park at your gallery, and it's got great ambition, right? The idea is to have the centering ambition.
No, we're not scaling.
Well,
that's it.
Hopefully you're not competing with us because you'd probably win.
I was going to say. But, and you know what the thing is? So I think we need to just expand what the possibilities of an artist can be in the 21st century. I don't need artist /activist /.
It's just artist.
I'm an artist.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just an artist.
Yeah. I can put in a plug for artists generally.
No.
Whenever I have a problem, I always talk to artists. Artists are my friends. I call Mark how often for advice and thoughts. When I couldn't figure out the marketing for my museum and my logo and my corporate image and 5 designers failed, I called an artist. I called John Baldessari that day, and he said, let me give it some thought. And then he came back 2 days later, and he took LACMA and he underlined the L and the A, made it symmetrical LA, and seemed pretty obvious that 20 years of thinking couldn't do that, and he did it in 2 days.
We come at it from a different, but also I push back against the dreamy artist, and poor thing, he has to be protected because he can't find the right shoe and the left shoe. I cannot stand that like romantic narrative too. I think that artists, wherever they choose to be, that's where the conversation can start.
Right.
And how you decide to be an artist or a director or a philanthropist in this time, I think that we can define it.
Right.
It doesn't there's no one prescription.
Well, and I think that's right, because it is creative practice overall, and artists are really good at that and seeing that future, and I do feel like we're all in it together.
Yeah.
A lot of people think of culture or museums as somehow encasing the past or holding a thing to preserve it, which we do, by the way, because future generations may indeed need it. But the thing that I love about what we're doing in LA a little bit is we're actually building that culture. We're making it. We're commissioning artworks. Artists are building. They're thinking. You're doing your thing in Leimert Park. We're building things, and it's kind of an exciting thing to think of all of us together in this, building something.
But it gets a little bit prickly because when you start talking, diversity we love. Oh yes, diversity. Now when you start talking about equity, that's like, no, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Now wait a minute, you're messing with the money now. You're messing with the job titles. Wait. They go diversity, equity, inclusion, but by the time you get to equity, if we're not doing equity, there ain't no inclusion.
That's
so
right.
It always gets very, very. That's I think where we're having the real conversation now at equity.
Right.
Now, equity has to do with power.
And it's not impossible to make a world as we want it.
Absolutely.
If we work at it towards
Absolutely.
that. And I always think that culture is a good field to do that in because, all of our personal identities, our histories, our lineage, our ancestors, it's all embedded somehow in culture. I see that in what you're doing in Leimert Park and what you're doing in your work. So hopefully we can take the culture part and make it, turn that into equity. Maybe a good space to practice that.
Yeah.
If that's possible. Well, I want to ask you, you've been running Art+Practice for
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
So what has been the response from the neighborhood, from people? Because I know there are people, because we're out there saying, forget the art, just fix the street lamps. So how has that all worked out with those people you have indeed listened to, have engaged? Now we're looking at contemporary art.
As long as you're listening to because we're so specific, we work with specifically contemporary art, and we have a very rigorous public program that we have. It's been overwhelmingly very successful because it's been embedded in the community. I'm not trying to colonize the community. That's the difference. People don't like to be told anything. They want to be heard, and they want to make their own decisions. I don't like the colonizing model. You don't know anything, I need to come and save you. No, that's a problem. That's like, no. But a conversation between two people, I'll learn something, you'll learn something, we'll go back and forth, and we'll come to something.
Yeah, and it's interesting. One of the main reasons that I covet the idea of being elsewhere is not to bring things to communities, although that's part of it. It's also how it will change the whole thing.
Absolutely.
How we'll think about museums, art, communities, being people differently,
Yeah.
if that's possible.
Of course it's possible. We don't have to say if. I mean,
All right, last question. I want to ask you how being a philanthropist, having a small institution, if that's it, has it gone back and impacted your work and how you think about the work, or do you, the paintings, now being specific, because you're a sculptor and a painter. It's all part of something.
it's all, I'm an artist.
Yes. I'll give you that, just today.
I'm an artist. So all of it, people used to separate. He's a philanthropist, he's an artist, listen, it's all
Part of
just
art.
little Mark. That's all. It's in my little world. It's all part of me. I don't try to separate it. I look in the mirror, I see me. And I don't try to dismantle it. I get a little older, I kind of go, whoa, a little bit, but it's me.
Yeah.
So I'm just an artist, and I'm okay with that.
And Mark has been a super inspiration to me and so many other people in our field about expanding that idea and seeing sort of an inclusiveness about what's possible for us in our, like what we do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just have gratitude to you for that, and thank you for what you do, and also look forward to the thing whatever we're going to do next.
Yeah, well, thank you.
in LA.
I appreciate it. And thank you guys for staying. I appreciate that too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.